Kainga Ora's homes. Each one of these is something that we celebrate as a government. Each one of these isn't just a house, it's going to be a home to a family, and it's going to be a warm and dry place, and a place where kids will make memories and families will put down their roots in this community. So the thing that excites me with each and every one of them is their tallying up. We've now delivered as a government in the 5 and a bit years that we've been in government nearly 12,000 additional public housing places for New Zealand. This is the most in a generation. It is quite a mind-boggling statistic to think about that 1 in 7 of our public houses or our social houses has been delivered by our government. And if we think that we've been building these since the 1930s, the fact that 1 in 7 of them has been delivered in the last 5 years, we can see what a commitment to fixing a housing crisis looks like. If we put that against what we saw in the previous 9 years, which was a net loss of social housing of 1,500 homes, it's not hard to see why we have the housing crisis that we have today. But I am a parochial Cantabrian, and we are here in Christchurch, and what this is absolutely great to see is that for our region in Canterbury, 1,908 new homes have been delivered since 2017 by our government. We've got another 1,000 in the pipeline, and again I'll put that against a net loss, the previous 9 years, a net loss of 341 homes in our region from the social housing register. We build our way out of a housing crisis by building houses, and that is what our government has demonstrated we are doing and what we have an ongoing commitment to keep doing. Thank you. I'm sure the question is for you.
Thank you, Megan. And it's great to be here. And earlier in the week, I had the opportunity to visit some Kainga Ora homes in the North Island that were part of the retrofit program that we've got, which is about making sure that those who are living in our social and public housing have warm, dry homes that are easy to heat and that are well heated, so that we can make sure that they can, have the best possible places to live. So the work that we've been doing across the public sector housing portfolio has been really extensive. It's great to celebrate another milestone here today, but I also want to send the message that our work here is not done. We've got an ongoing build program and an ongoing retrofit program to make sure that we're actually delivering the houses that New Zealanders deserved. We were never going to turn around the housing crisis overnight, but we're really proud of what we've been able to do in the last 5.5 years, and really optimistic about the amount of progress that we can continue to make. And with that, I'm now happy to open up for questions.
Primary data shows rental prices continue to rise. Have your tenancy law changes failed?
No, I don't accept that the tenancy law changes are the only contributing factor to those. I mean, we've seen interest rates going up. We've seen an overall level of inflation that, of course, is having an impact on the level of rent that renters are paying. The changes that we have made have been about giving tenants more security. They've been about ensuring that landlords are fulfilling their commitments to provide warm, dry, healthy homes. I'm really proud of the changes that we have made in that area. Well, maybe I'll let Dr. Woods comment on that too.
Thank you. I think one of the things that we see in parts of the country where we have been drastically adding to supply is where we're seeing the lowest rates of rent increases, and they are rates of rent increases that are below the rate of inflation. So I think anything that we're seeing rising lower than inflation means that actually that people are getting ahead when you put wage increases into there as well. The way you fix a housing crisis is by building more houses. We can look at the evidence around the country and see where new houses are coming on board that people's rents aren't going up so much. Our rents are high in this country because we simply did not have enough homes, and that is what our government is intent on fixing.
Prime Minister, do you plan to meet Joe Biden in PNG?
Look, I'm not announcing any further additions to my international travel program today. Where the opportunity arises to meet other world leaders when they're in the neighbourhood, of course that's something that we do give weighty consideration to. So I'm not in a position to make any announcements today on what my travel may be, but where there are opportunities, then of course we look to take up those opportunities.
The Ministry of Education's own data shows that missing just half a day of school can impact a student's achievements.
Yet there are some schools that have lost more than 100 hours of teaching time in the past year due to reduced timetables. Is that good enough?
Look, it's a really challenging environment for schools, but there's no doubt that the disruption that was caused by COVID-19 over the last 3 years is still having an effect on our schools at the moment. And I know that the teaching community in particular will be looking ahead to the winter with a degree of trepidation, because a lot of that rostering home that we saw last year was driven by COVID-19. Once it gets into a school classroom environment, teachers get it. You then end up with a limited supply of relief teachers available. Many of the relief teachers themselves were unable to go to work because of COVID-19 factors as well. And so that had a really big disruptive effect on our education system last year. We're doing all we can to support schools through that. We've been recruiting more teachers internationally and domestically. We've been focused on getting more teachers into the classroom. But we do want to see less disruption in schools. And we've got a really concerted focus too on getting kids back into school as well. We saw the overall rates of attendance declining quite steeply last year because of COVID-19 factors. Some of that was justified. So where kids had COVID-19, they were often out of school. They didn't hit the attendance targets because they were at home isolating, as we asked them to do. But, I think we're all very, very focused on getting kids back into school and actually supporting our teaching community as well.
What tax changes are still on the table for Labor for this upcoming election policy?
Yeah, we haven't made any announcements around what our election policy is on tax yet, and so I'm not playing the what's on the table, what's off the table game at the moment. We will have a tax policy well before the election so that New Zealanders know what they'd be voting for. We set out a very clear tax policy in 2020, and that's guided the decisions that we've taken in this budget as well as the decisions we've taken in the last two budgets.
Why not follow Jacinda Ardern's footsteps and completely rule out a capital gains tax entirely?
Well, Jacinda Ardern's commitments were made in the context of an election campaign. That is the appropriate time for governments and parties to indicate what they would and they wouldn't do if elected. I note that none of the other parties have released their tax policies for the forthcoming election yet either. So, the election's still 5 months away, or election campaign is still 5 months away, and I can reassure New Zealanders well before they come to make their decisions around how they're going to vote, they'll know exactly where we stand on tax.
Is a capital gains tax still on the table then?
As I've indicated, I'm not making tax announcements other than for this term of government. And for this term of government, I was really clear yesterday that no capital gains tax, no wealth tax, and no significant other, tax changes that haven't previously been canvassed. We're sticking to the commitments we made in 2020.
National says it's worked with groups who work with the homeless on its rental policy. Do you accept your changes have made it harder for renters?
As I've said, no, I don't. The National Party constantly seem to ignore some of the most critical people when it comes to the debate about renting, and that is the tenants. They don't seem to have any real interest in making sure that those tenants have warm, dry homes, that those tenants have security in their rentals. They're far more interested in dealing with the interests of landlords and making sure that landlords can make significant profits than they are in the interests of tenants. But again, I'll ask Dr. Woods to comment on that.
I've seen comments from the National Party that they've been working with organisations that are committed to helping the homelessness. I haven't seen them name an organisation that has given them this advice that a war on renters is the way to solve homelessness. I challenge the National Party to come forward and name those organisations who do work on a day-to-day basis with the homeless, that this is the way to solve a crisis. Bear in mind, what we have enacted is ending the practice of no cause evictions. Of course, if there is just cause for a tenant to have to leave a property, then that is still entirely possible. What we have ended is an unfair practice when for no reason someone can be evicted from their home.
The government and successive governments have failed to provide equitable funding for kura kaupapa Māori despite fantastic results for Māori kids. Why won't the government commit equitable funding for these kura?
We've been working very closely with kura kaupapa Māori over the time that we've been in government to get a more enduring funding model in place for them. It's not a like-for-like comparison with other English medium, to use the technical term, education settings. So when it comes to kohanga reo, kura kaupapa Māori and wānanga, they are a different part of our education system. They've got different characteristics, different ways of working, and we need to make sure that the funding model, where we provide taxpayer subsidies to them, reflect that. So that's what we've been working with them to design. Now, a lot of research and analysis has gone into that work, and you're seeing some of that at the moment. the government's absolutely committed to making sure that we design funding models for the Māori medium part of our education system that are appropriately for them.
Will you assimilate kura into the mainstream schooling system, as those are the claims by those giving evidence at the Waitangi hearing?
No, we want to recognise that we've got a really good, emerging, robust Māori medium education system that's delivering some incredible results, and we want to make sure that we're properly supporting that and properly resourcing that, but that doesn't mean treating them like mainstream schools, and that principle applies right the way through the Māori medium educational pathway, whether it's from kohanga reo, who are dealing with the youngest Māori babies, through to kura kaupapa, through to wānanga at the tertiary end. We want to make sure that we're working in partnership with them and that we're funding them appropriately.
Will you stand by the pledge made by nzherald to have an Erebus memorial in Auckland? We heard this morning that it's no longer going ahead in Whanau Park.
Look, I want to acknowledge the recent decision. That wasn't the government's decision, but it clearly has an impact on the deliverability of an Erebus memorial as it was previously envisaged. So we will go back to the drawing board, and we will make sure that there is an appropriate recognition of those who lost their lives at Erebus. Clearly we're going to have to rethink what that looks like and where that might be, but we remain committed to ensuring that there is an appropriate recognition of those who lost their lives at Erebus.
What's your message to the families who've been waiting 40 years?
Look, I acknowledge that this is, the work that our government's been doing in the last few years to try and bring some closure to this debate clearly has had a bit of a setback in the last 48 hours. We want to see this through. We want to make sure that there is appropriate recognition. Those families have waited a long time for that.
Back onto the topic of housing. As you mentioned, the work's still ongoing in this area. There are 8 homes open today, but thousands on the waiting list for homes in Christchurch. What's your message to them?
Fundamentally, we've got a wait list because over a long period of time, governments have not built enough affordable rental housing, so social and public housing. Our government is remedying that. As Dr. Woods pointed out, 1 in 7 of our current homes in that category have come onto the market or into the rental market since we have been in government. That's significant progress, and we want to keep the momentum going there so that we can actually deal with that long-term legacy that we inherited.
Was housing something that you discussed with Mayor Phil Major this morning?
We had a wide-ranging, conversation across a range of areas, including actually the fact that housing was a topic that came up in those conversations, including the fact that actually the Canterbury Christchurch region is probably better positioned on housing issues than many other parts of the country at the moment. But we also were able to talk about the fact that, more than a decade on from the Canterbury earthquakes, that there's a real vibrancy in the region now. And that's something that I've certainly, as a regular visitor over the last decade or so, it's something that I've really noticed in my recent visits to Christchurch, and I think that there's a lot of reason for optimism here.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Major about Te Whatu Ora and Te Whatu Ora Canterbury's wait times?
We did have a conversation, but I know that he also met with the Minister of Health yesterday, and so was able to get into those topics of conversation in much greater detail. And I think he welcomed that opportunity to engage with her. We know that we've still got a health workforce challenge around the country. So if we take one of the big pressure points in this area is in the area of anaesthesia, and that's having a disruptive effect. So we're looking at how we can support that from around the country, and that might mean bringing people in from other parts of the country to help to provide a little bit more stability so that those surgical procedures, for example, can actually take place with a bit more certainty. So that's one of the advantages of having a nationally coordinated health service. You can actually make sure you've got the right people in the right place at the right time.
Are you concerned about the spread of misinformation in regards to the Treaty of Waitangi?
I think conversations around the Treaty of Waitangi will always be ongoing. And I think we should approach those with an open mind, with a degree of constructive dialogue and debate. The Treaty of Waitangi will always be a topic of conversation for New Zealanders. I think all New Zealanders should be curious about it. They should be inquisitive about it. They should ask questions. That's actually integral, I think, to us continuing to move forward as a country.
One from my colleague. We know you're a sausage roll man. What are your thoughts on scones?
I have the odd scone from time to time. Pastry's more my thing, but you never say never.
Cheese or date?
Probably cheese.
And anywhere in particular is your favourite place to get a scone?
No, I can't say I'm a big scone eater. If you ask me about pastries, I could give you a much more detailed explanation, but thanks everybody. Cheers.
Thank you.